Hi, so you're really welcome. Today I'm going to talk about something that touches almost every ADHD at some point, and that's burnout. It's that moment your body and your mind may be just whispering to you, I can't do this, even when perhaps you still feel motivated and you want to keep moving ahead. The thing is, burnout and ADHD doesn't look the same for everyone. We often move between intense energy and deep exhaustion because our brains are wired for interest and urgency and purpose, which isn't always aligned with that steady and predictable output. So today I want to walk you through three things: the road to burnout, what actually happens for ADHDers, how to avoid it, and with awareness and boundaries and self-understanding, and then what to do when you realize you're there. And that's really important, right? How to restore, balance, and reconnect to what really matters. So let's first look to the road to burnout. It often begins from a place of passion. We may be doing something that excites us. It could be a project, a cause, or a new idea. Or it can also sometimes be just within a normal work that we are weighed down from the expectations of others, the daily grind, and we get burned out. We can get burned out doing what we love just as much as burned out by something that's wearing us out. As Dr. Ned Hallowell says, our brain is like a Ferrari engine with bicycle brakes, right? We can power ahead, and just sometimes we just don't know when to put on the brakes. We just don't feel it. I think we're really, it's part of the ADHD spark, that allows us to really propel forward. So underneath that drive can sometimes, also be that desire to prove ourselves, to keep up, to be seen as capable, sometimes in a world where we feel misunderstood or we don't understand ourselves. And so it can very much be about us wanting to prove to people that we can keep going and not knowing what that benchmark is. We're assuming everybody can do this, so why can't I? And that can be quite unrealistic. Over time, that can look like we're saying yes to everything, that old classic people pleasing. We may be working twice as hard to meet expectations and often may not even have clarity on what those expectations are because we've been afraid to ask. And that could be in a performance review, that could be around the job that it is that you've been asked to do, that you're not actually clear on what it is you're supposed to be doing, but you kind of still set this mark of you still have to achieve something great because isn't that what everybody does? It can also result in, from perfectionism. One of the key parts of burnout is really just ignoring our body signals. And because we think we should be pushing through, we don't actually recognize the signs that are there that actually, we're tired and we need a reset. Um, I think a big part of it is recognizing that when we are getting tired, it's not because of a weakness. It's human, but it's part of a nervous system depletion. And that is really something we have to recognize, that this is normal. It is completely normal that when you push yourself too hard and on too little fuel, that we will pay the price for it, and that is okay, and it's all right to give ourselves time. Um, for ADHDers as well, burnout isn't just about exhaustion. Sometimes it's actually about disconnection. And I think that's often one of the biggest part. We disconnect from ourselves. We've disconnected from what gives us energy, from where we get our joy, and disconnection from what we need. And so, a big part of where we see this disconnection as well is within the workplace with presenteeism. It's not actually absenteeism, it's presenteeism. It's people who are there and in work, but just disconnected, not engaged, not motivated, and just going through the motion. That is a huge issue and costs billions within the workplace, within the UK and globally. But for ADHDers, this disconnection actually really does have a much deeper impact, because as ADHDers, we're driven by passion, we are driven by interest. And where there's no point to something, there is no point. And so that shut off is actually denying our brain that ability to be able to produce the dopamine that we need. And it's a full nervous system shutdown when that goes on over a long period of time. There's also another part which is really important, and it's kind of that deeper layer of where that's really important, which is about knowing ourselves. And this is a part that I think for ADHDers we get tripped up on a lot, and I see it, hear it so much within coaching. It starts really with understanding who we are, our values, our needs, our strengths, our boundaries. When we live and work in ways that go against our values, our nervous system feels unsafe. So, for example, if you deeply value creativity but spend your day doing repetitive admin tasks, your brain is constantly fighting this. Or perhaps you value connection, but you're feeling isolated, you don't feel you can share, or you're just not surrounded by people whose energy that you can really feed from. You're using all your mental energy just to cope. And that's really underestimated, just the amount of burn of energy that ADHD people go through. I heard a wonderful description of a neurotypical brain versus a neurodivergent, like ADHD brain, and it's described as two glasses. A neurotypical brain gets energy from two sources. One glass gets filled with dopamine when they need to go do something, and then when that's a little bit low, they can just draw on the other cup or the other glass, which is filled from eating, sleeping, rest, hydration, grounding, breathing, exercise, all those other things. So they've got two cups or two glasses to be fueled by. For the ADHD brain, the glass that's normally filled with dopamine, that can be difficult to fill. And so we're taking from this glass of energy that we have to keep refilling constantly. And if we're not doing that, we are draining ourselves. And so recognizing that all of those foundations are absolutely crucial. And I'll talk about that again in a moment. So values, I said, was really important. The other are needs, understanding our needs. We may have needs for stimulation, for flexibility. We don't always like rigidity, encouragement, autonomy. We're quite independent beings. But many environments are built around sameness and structure and compliance, and that mismatch can also drain us. I had a client recently in coaching, and we were dealing with her need around external validation. And she really realized that she needed to be told that she was doing a good job. Just presenting a report and being told, could you change X, Y, and Z wasn't enough, because it left her in a place where she was ruminating, did I do a good job? Did I not do a good job? And then that would just take hold. And the energy drain of that rumination, of then convincing herself she was doing a terrible job, when in fact all that was being asked for were just a few small changes. So her need for validation, external validation, was absolutely crucial. And so it was really, really important that she was able to talk to her manager about that and say, in a very positive way, not a needy way, but a very positive way, I work better with this and I'll be better with the team with this. And that's a much more positive way. And that's with coaching, that's what we can work through, of how you can address your needs and present your needs to others. And then in time, we also work on how to self-validate by starting to learn your strengths. And that's hugely important. Strengths, natural strengths of ADHD are creativity and empathy, intuition, problem solving, bravery, resilience, kindness, being humble. They're all traits that I see in leaps and bounds, let alone all of the other normal human strengths that people bring. Being humble is one we're particularly good at, and we often dismiss our own successes, dismiss them with a yeah, but, as though we can, we can award them to somebody else or something else, or else we just don't acknowledge them, often because of the disruption in our reward pathway. Often what happens as well is that value and worth is often attached to outcomes. So if I can only do this, then I know I'm good. And if I can't even do this, well, then I'm useless. And that's not how we grow confidence, by placing value on outcome. We grow confidence really by recognizing our strengths and attaching value to those strengths. So acknowledging, yes, I did this, it was great, but the strengths I used to do that, I was brave, I was courageous, I was giving in how I helped share with others in the team and how we built this. And so by focusing on our strengths, we are starting to build a toolkit which results in confidence, but that toolkit is what fuels us, provides us with energy, and also, that sparks of joy, and that fuels us. So really, really important to acknowledge, our values. When we work against them, we're in trouble. Our needs, if they're not being met, we're going to be draining on our energy and going into those classic rumination or procrastination. And then our strengths, recognizing they're a real source of energy. And without them, we start to move into potentially within to that burnout. The other part that is hugely important in terms of managing to avoid that burnout trap is psychological safety. Absolutely crucial. Psychological safety within the workplace is spoken about a lot, but we also need psychological safety within our family life, within our friendships, within the relationships. So whether it's at work, at home, or among friends, psychological safety means feeling like we can be ourselves without fear or judgment or punishment. And it's knowing that can say, I'm struggling. I'm struggling today, or I feel wrecked today. I'm just not feeling it. I need to take a break, or I need to do this differently. When we don't have that psychological safety within workplace, we see it a lot where people don't have that. That leads to pushing ourselves, that leads to working outside our needs, outside our values, and not having boundaries to be able to say, no, this isn't going to work for me. We end up masking, we become overwhelmed, we overcompensate, and we exhaust ourselves by trying to appear fine. So, in safe environments, we can absolutely thrive. We can speak up for ourselves, and we surround ourselves in a way and in systems that are going to work for ourselves, and allow our creativity and connection be there. Um, a word, if you are a leader and you're listening to this, or a parent or a friend, creating that safety isn't optional. It's really important that people who share that they maybe need something that's outside of what's seen as the norm and they need more flexibility, that could make the difference for them to thriving or to entering into overwhelm zones and reaching burnout. So really important to acknowledge. So, avoiding that, protect your energy, know the foundations of your energy: sleep, hydration, healthy foods at regular times, something we can find difficult. Exercise, movement, we know is really good, be it going off for a sprint or a swim, or it could just be moving outside, getting outside, going around the corner, going up and down stairs a few minutes. We know that sparks the brain up. Grounding, feeling connected within your body. When we lose that connection, that's when burnout really can start to take hold, because we're just unaware of what's actually happening. Our breathing is absolutely hugely important as well. We can't function on shallow breaths. We can't function well on shallow breaths. Our brain needs 25% of our oxygen in the system. And when we don't have that, it's literally like a sliding door to our executive functions. So therefore, we can no longer decision make and prioritize and plan and manage time, things that are already challenging. and emotion, that emotion center can start to become the driver and go into autopilot. And that's when we become more emotional, more emotionally dysregulated, and become overwhelmed. So that is key. That really is key, of really understanding how to protect your energy. And that requires systems, structures that you can build flexibility into. It doesn't have to be rigid, but it requires intention that you want to do that. The other part is about protecting recovery time. There was a great LinkedIn post that I looked at recently, and the reactions to it were absolutely enormous. And in it was suggested that for resets and valuing resets, could you sit for 10 minutes in work doing nothing, doing absolutely nothing, giving yourself permission to do that and not feeling guilty? And the overwhelming reaction to it from neurodivergent, I suspect, as well as neurotypical people, they couldn't. They couldn't even conceive of doing that. But the value of it, we know, is absolutely enormous. So just taking that time out when you have finished something, when you have completed a task, a project, just, or, it could be on a longer thing, taking some time out. And that time out could be 5 minutes if it's just finishing a task, giving yourself a little bit of time, or it could be time out might be actually I need to take tomorrow off, or tomorrow afternoon off, or I just need to disconnect for a little while. Protecting that recovery time, is really important. And so that's very much feeds into, that protecting your energy. Redefining productivity, that's also important with ADHDers. That to-do list can be enormous, and the feeling that we can never get through it, and we just keep adding and don't finish things. But also very often it's because we haven't prioritized, and we think everything is important and everything is urgent, and that just becomes overwhelming. So learning to manage productivity and doing small steps like working on 3 good wins within a day, an important, a medium, a small. So starting to view that to-do list in a different way and don't feel we've got to get through everything. And managing yeses, building those boundaries about being able to say, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I'd love to, but let me get back to you on it. Really thinking before saying yes, because when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. And when you keep saying yes to things, to outcomes, to projects, to other people's requests, you're saying no to yourself. And that's really important to acknowledge. And so to value yourself and value that you need rest, you need space, and you need time for clarity just to be able to sit and think. That's important. So saying no is a really healthy thing to do. And then, to be able to build those structures around the foundations of the eating, sleeping, grounding, all of those things. It's about building rhythms. They don't have to be solid, rigid routines. They can be just gentle anchors that we can do. They might be morning rituals, or maybe they're just daily rituals that you do at different times. It doesn't have to be set that it's always the same. And if I don't do it then I have failed. You haven't. You are going to do. We need to understand our energy rhythms and our need for flexibility. When you're already burnt out, and if that's a place that you feel you've already arrived at, that's not weakness. It's not being lazy. It's an energy system that is now depleted. And it's your brain telling you, I need rest. It's saying no. It's a sensory overload, and you are saying no now to things to help protect you. So it's about stopping to stop pushing yourself. Just give yourself time to rest. And that can be very difficult to do. And sometimes we need to bring other people on board to feel we can give ourselves permission to do that. Sometimes it's getting permission from others at that time. And that can be really, really important. And I spoke recently with a PhD graduate, and she spoke about that realizing she needed time out to take 2 days off from doing her PhD. But the only way that she could feel comfortable with doing that was by asking, could she take that time off? Of which she said she already knew the answer, but she needed to ask because by being told it was okay to, that meant she didn't feel guilty for it. So then she could have real rest as opposed to resting, but the brain's still going and still questioning whether she should, because that wouldn't have been a rest. We try to reconnect with what's meaningful and what does give you joy or what used to give you a spark, and try to reconnect with those things, reconnecting with nature, reconnecting with grounding, getting back into your body through practices you may have already done before, or you may look to start trying new ones, but starting small, taking pressure off yourself and easing yourself into new or rekindling gentle habits you would have had before around sleep, around hydration. Really important. Hydration is so underestimated, absolutely crucial. So, drinking water, absolutely crucial. Getting out for daily walks, just starting to build little things. What little wins could I have today? And they don't have to be earth shattering, just small wins that you can say, I can start to build this. And then the other last thing, and this is absolutely crucial, and I think it covers everything to do with ADHD, is you don't do it alone. So whether you are at a stage of where you are sensing maybe you might be getting overwhelmed, and maybe even if it's a term burnout that you haven't used before, but you feel you are overwhelmed, or if you're already there and at a point of you just need to stop, do not do ADHD alone. Interdependence is absolutely crucial. Bringing other people on board, getting the psychological safety either through a trusted member of your team and work, or it could be, if you're lucky, a manager who may be understanding. It could be a friend, it could be somebody within your family. But start to share what it is that you are feeling, what you are thinking, and what it is that you need. And not doing ADHD alone covers everything, because getting outside of our head, we have to remember, because our brain is so on all of the time and that default mode network is firing different thoughts at us constantly or getting us stuck into rumination, we have to circuit break and we've got to get out of our heads. And that is how we do it. We do not do it alone. So share what's on your mind. Have somebody that you can talk to about it if you're already in burnout. But if you feel that perhaps you're on that road there, there's so much that you can do. You can start to reappraise, what are my values? What are my needs? What boundaries do I have? Coaching is superb to help you work that through. But you can also do that with somebody, a trusted friend, also, that you can start to flesh that out. Write it down, type it out, just get it out and get it down in front of you so you can start to crystallize. I hope you found that helpful and interesting. And we are here to help you on that journey with ADHD. And I hope that you have enjoyed this whole series of ADHD talks. So for now, my friends, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed.